The Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Realtors presents a webinar with End Homelessness St Johns for Realtors Care Week 2020.
And welcome to this webinar, a joint project of the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Realtors Care Committee and End Homelessness St Johns. We'll go through some brief introductions in a minute, but we're happy for you to join us for this project, which is part of our Realtors Care effort in Newfoundland and Labrador, and that coincides with what we're doing nationally with realtors across the country. A combination, as you'll hear, of advocacy, awareness, and a celebration of the good work that realtors do in the community every year. So without further ado, I'm going to ask, we have with us today the National Chair of Realtors Care Week on behalf of CREA, Kimberly French, who's also the past president of NLAR. And I'm going to ask her to say a few words, and then we'll ask Michelle Dove to do a very brief couple of comments. Michelle is the provincial chair, and then to introduce our two speakers, Doug Pawson and Simone Lilly. So Kimberly, over to you.
Thank you, Ed. Realtors Care Week is the Canadian Real Estate Association's annual celebration of outstanding volunteer service realtors give to communities across Canada. Last year, CREA's Realtors Care Committee launched the first ever Realtors Care Week with over 40 boards and associations participating. This year, the types of hands-on activities we saw in 2019 are simply not possible in many parts of Canada. But there are still ways realtors can give back and help others while following public health guidelines. That's why for Realtors Care Week 2020, we are rallying the realtor community in a national week of learning, advocacy, and celebration of volunteer services. We are focusing on homelessness in recognition of how homelessness has emerged as a critical issue during the pandemic. Raising awareness among realtors of housing and shelter-related issues is a big part of Realtor Cares Week 2020. On Tuesday, CREA hosted a national conference on homelessness. Today's session, hosted by NLAR, fulfills the same purpose on a provincial level. So on behalf of CREA and CREA's Realtors Care Committee, it is my pleasure to bring greetings to you today. I'm looking forward to learning more about End Homelessness St Johns and the role realtors in our province can play in its work. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. And now I'll call on Michelle Dove on behalf of the NLAR Realtors Care Committee, if you'd say a few words and then turn over to Doug and Simone.
Thank you, Ed. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Newfoundland Labrador Association of Realtors and the NLAR Care Committee, Realtors Care Committee, I want to welcome Doug Pawson and Simone Lilly from End Homelessness St Johns and thank them for joining us today to introduce EHSJ to realtors across the province. End Homelessness St Johns' mission is to ensure that everyone in the city has a place to live. They work with community stakeholders to accomplish that goal. That's important. Homelessness is a complex issue, and it takes many people and many organizations to address the aspects of the issue. It is one of the reasons why NLAR identified homelessness as a strategic issue for us as an organization representing real estate professionals. Realtors have skills, knowledge, and contacts individually and as a group that can help. So right now, I will turn it over to Doug and Simone to tell us more about EHSJ. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Michelle.
Welcome.
And Ed, we appreciate the chance to be here with everybody today. If you bear with us, I'm just going to bring up the screen, and I guess while I'm doing that, I will introduce myself. So I'm Doug Pawson. I'm the Executive Director of End Homelessness St Johns. And with me today is our Manager of Community Investments, Simone Lilly. And we're really excited to have this conversation. It's really timely for us because we've been launching some initiatives within the community that I think have a lot of direct overlap with the work that NLAR is doing. So, great. So you did a great introduction for us, Michelle, which helps to set the context around homelessness. So this is our team, And simply put, we exist to end homelessness in St. John's. Our vision is a place that everyone has that everyone in our community has a place to call home. And so we do this by working collaboratively with community partners, community agencies, with the provincial government, the municipal governments, and the federal government. And we do this on a daily basis. And in our work, we try to do it through a coordinated and systematic approach to ensuring that folks in our community have the resources and supports in order to be successfully housed. So administratively, we're the federal government's partner for St. John's. We're technically called the community entity. And what that means is we administer the federal government's investments into homelessness for St. John's. So over the next 5 years, we'll be investing over $8.7 million into the community to support efforts to ending homelessness. And I mentioned before, we do this through what we call an integrated system of care approach. So as the system planning entity, we take a strategic approach. So we do that we have a community plan to end homelessness. And we work really closely with leaders in the community, with the provincial government, to identify ways in which we can streamline resources and to ensure that everybody has the supports in place. So when we boil that down, what does it look like? It's supply and demand. Do we have the supply of housing related resources and supports to meet the demand of our most vulnerable? So when we're thinking about Home Connect before we launched it, we kind of had to take stock of some of the macro level indicators in our community. And what we noticed, which is unique to St. John's in relation to other parts of the country, we have a healthy private market vacancy rate. About 7% is the estimate. So what does that mean for us? It means folks who are vulnerable, who need housing, folks who are experiencing homelessness, we have options for them. If you look at larger urban centers, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, those vacancy rates can be 1% or less, and the average rents are incredibly high. So thinking of the way in which we structure our supports and our programs and our initiatives, we know that we have this key piece in our back pocket, that we have a vacancy rate that can be used for supporting our most vulnerable. On the flip side, we also know that there's a lot of community supports in place. We know there's a lot of community agencies doing wonderful work. So how do we connect those dots? And that's what we're doing through our work and our systems-wide approach. And Home Connect is one of the initiatives that we launched to really connect those dots and make the connections. And so we value the opportunity to work with not just the community agencies, but also the existing private market, property management companies, real estate agents, and others to really hone in on some of the challenges that folks are facing when it comes to housing stability and making those connections for successful tenancies. So I'll leave it there and I'll turn it over to my colleague who will talk a bit more about Home Connect.
Hey folks, so as Doug mentioned, we know in St. John's we have high vacancy rates, we have landlords who are trying to fill their units, and we also have community agencies that are working extremely hard to find housing placements for the tenants they serve. And so basically End Homelessness St. Johns said we have to create something to bring those two pieces together, that opportunity and that challenge. But we can't do it on its own. We have to create a program that we would then support and find other supports that are available in the community. So basically we've launched a program that's called Home Connect. Home Connect essentially in its bare bones is an online housing inventory that brings those landlords together into one central place that can then be accessed by community agencies kind of looking through those vacant units that the landlords bring to the table, supported by community agencies. So part of that is we also look at what a tenancy means. So what does a successful rental arrangement look like for individuals that are facing barriers? We look at what those barriers are, and we think about how we can break those barriers and support individuals so that once they have a lease and a key, they stay housed. So originally we were going to launch things a little bit later on, but because of the pandemic, normally the pandemic has slowed everything down for folks, but for us, it's actually the reverse effect. So as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, we actually launched the program ahead of schedule. And really the reason for that is we recognize that this is a time where everyone needs to be staying home as much as possible, but that's really difficult for folks who don't have a home. So we saw this as a critical need and the need to sort of speed up our process. So what is Home Connect? It's an online housing inventory. It's a standardized process, and it supports some benefits. So I'm just going to talk about each one of those very briefly now. So Home Connect is an online housing inventory. So it's a website that looks a lot like a Kijiji program or rental listings, but it has the ability but it's only accessed by community agencies. So it brings all the units that would be a good fit for an individual facing a barrier to a centralized location, and then community agencies can kind of filter through those listings and have the contacts to the landlords to be able to then really narrow down on what a perfect fit would be for that individual. So it gives a bit of that additional information that would be needed to make a good match. It's also a standardized process. So right now in St. John's, there's a lot of really great landlords out there working with different community agencies, but we could see there was a bit of a frustration growing because each community agency would have a different process. There's different forms, there's different points in contact. So you have a landlord who really wants to do good work for the community, and they're trying, but they're kind of getting a little bit frustrated with some of those barriers or just differences in approach. So what we've tried to do is bring all those community agencies together as a partnership and really standardize that process that a landlord would encounter in entering into a tenancy for an individual facing barriers. So what that looks like is we provide rental inspections for all the units that would come online, third-party rental inspections at no cost, and that just ensures that all the units that would come on board basically are safe places to live. We also do standard documentation. So we provide the rental agreement. We set it up and we coordinated it right across the board for all community agencies. And we're also a single point in contact if there are any concerns for a landlord. So a lot of the time, a landlord just wants to know if something's going wrong in this tenancy, I want to do it, but who do I call? If I need some extra help. So we create that. So there's one person, whether they have 5 units with us or 10 units with us, there's one person that they're going to talk to about all of those different units. It's also a program about supports and benefits. So when we designed this program, we actually designed it based on the feedback from landlords. So we did a bit of an engagement process, a focus group session, some information sessions, and we tried to really drill down on what would make this program kind of worth it for a landlord to, or make it comparable to what would be in the market, right? And so some of that feedback has really designed our program. So we know that tenant insurance would go a long way. So we cover tenant insurance for all the tenants in our units, and we make sure that that's set up and we coordinate that. We know that the units coming on board, that's an asset for a landlord. And that asset needs to be protected because it's a financial investment. So we recognize that, and we've put in place a landlord protection fund with a $10,000 claim limit. So that covers any damages that might happen as a result of this tenancy. And also if rent wasn't paid, for example, the landlord would never be faced with a situation where they wouldn't get their rent at the end of the day. We would cover that as part of that fund. And there's also supports that are in place tied to these tenancies. So once a lease and a key are established, we have community agencies that are regularly checking on the tenants. So if a landlord notices something's up, maybe there's a few issues that they're facing, well, we can connect right away with that community agency to then check on the tenant themselves and see what's going on, or kind of give them a gentle nudge in certain things, or maybe there's a need that's not being met. So what that does is we look at small problems and address them as small problems before they grow into big problems. And that's not something that the private market could give someone. So who can Home Connect help? Well, it's a program for landlords, it's a program for community agencies, and it's a program for tenants. So in terms of landlords, as Doug said, we have a high vacancy rate right now. And there's also a bit of a, turnarounds on units take time. And every time you do a turnaround, that's money lost. So our program kind of reduces those vacancies. We're able to provide kind of holding fees so that, if it takes a while to fill that unit, the landlord's getting rent right away. In terms of quick turnaround time, that's us. We'll kind of move someone out, and then right away they're still getting some income from that unit while they're waiting for the next person to perhaps move in. we do the screening. So we've heard so many times that landlords get frustrated. They set up all these appointments to meet people, and then folks aren't showing up or returning calls, or they're just trying to tease through, who an individual is when they're talking to them. So for us, we do that screening of the tenants to make sure that it's a fit with the unit that they're going into. We'll rehouse tenants when needed. And again, like I said, there's a designated point of contact if there's any problems that are encountered. This is also a program for community agencies. We have community agencies that are working so hard with tenants right now, individuals just looking to find, a stable home. But right now they're sifting through Kijiji ads, Facebook Marketplace, word of mouth, they're calling landlords. And that's a lot of time that's lost that could be spent, in other contexts in the housing and homelessness sector. So what we do is, by creating that online housing inventory, it saves everyone a ton of time. It just streamlines things, and it sort of builds that partnership in the community so that we're all working together. So it really truly helps those community agencies. It gives support with documentation, because that's a difficult thing for folks. Where do we get the forms to get someone set up, and how do we set up the rental agreement or moving and that type of thing. So we'll support with that documentation. We'll send the agreements out. We'll make sure both parties have signed. We'll have that safe. If there's ever a need for that agreement, we can produce it. We do those third-party rental inspections. So for community agencies, they truly want to make sure that where the individual they're supporting is going is a safe and healthy place for them to live, because it's, we want them to be stable in that home. We want that to be their home, not just a housing placement. So we provide those rental inspections and also mediation to help resolve any landlord-tenant conflicts. So on our team, we have some really great knowledge of the Residential Tenancies Act and resources in the community, and some good problem solving ability, having encountered many different problems in terms of tenancies. So we're able to help mediate some of those problems when community agencies come to us. And also the supports in place for successful tenancies. And it helps tenants, which is probably the most important of all of this, is it can really support a stable long-term housing, instead of having someone find a unit and have problems, and then you have a landlord who might have damage to their unit and this person is evicted, and then it's this big cycle that happens over and over. So the goal of this program is to really help those tenants find a long-term housing, to find a home. It also helps the tenants develop positive relationships with landlords, because we're setting folks up for success, and we want to create those relationships. It supports independence and self-sufficiency. It also helps tenants start learning about their rights and responsibilities as a tenant, and what to do to resolve issues that may arise. So for us, when we think about a successful tenancy in our program, it depends on a few things. For us, it's a good fit. We have to make sure that where the individual is going makes sense for their circumstance, makes sense for the landlord and for that neighborhood. We need to make sure that we have good communication, because we know that by communicating frequently and ongoing between landlords, community agency, us as the coordinating body and the tenant, then we can kind of work through some of those smaller problems before they become big. There's a need for understanding, because we know that problems happen, disagreements happen, mistakes will be made, and that's to be expected. That happens in the private market. What we're trying to do is make it a safe place for those mistakes to happen, and that's why we talk about that landlord protection fund. So we know that things may go wrong, and Home Connect is sort of designed as a catcher, is meant to support when those things go wrong. And then it's also going to take responsibility. So we see all of those stakeholders we talked about, those four, us, the community agency, the tenant, and the landlord. We all have obligations and responsibilities to create a successful tenancy. And when it comes down to it, it's about us all working together and understanding what our roles are. And that's what we're trying to do. So as we said, we launched this way ahead of what we had anticipated, in April as a response to the pandemic. And then we put out a big major advertising blitz in August to try and spread the news, the word about our program, and to try and start bringing some units on board. So it was through Kijiji, some of the various, radio programs, through social media ads. We tried various sources. Some of you may, there's kind of an image in the middle. Some of you may have received this little postcard. But that was kind of our first start. So now we're kind of following up on some of those leads and, still trying to just raise awareness, because a lot of landlords just don't even know about our program. And in terms of our current stats, so since we launched, we now have 21 landlords who are on board. We have 31 active units, and rents are as low as $500 and as high as about $1,300. But for us, I would say that kind of our priority is those 1 to 2 bedroom units and the affordable units, because that's often the units that the individuals we support require. So when we talk about today and why we're all here together, kind of looking at how can NLAR and Homelessness St Johns work together to end homelessness. So the first thing we think about is forming new partnerships. I heard in the introduction, how NLAR has a role in terms of advocacy and awareness and celebration of work in the community. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to advocate on these issues. We're trying to, or advocate for change in terms of systems. We're trying to raise awareness around our program and our other programs around the need in the community. And we're also trying to celebrate the partnerships that are out there and, and the work that's being done in the community. So we think about forming new partnership with NLAR in terms of what are the opportunities that we could pursue together? What are the initiatives we could work on together? What are the things, the parts of the puzzle that we haven't even thought about, but we know kind of on this call today that there's experts in the room that could kind of support us with that. We talk about raising awareness. So we very much want to raise awareness about our Home Connect program, because it is very, very new, and also about our organization and the need in the community. And then finally, creating a network. So we know that for us to be successful, we have to get out there and start talking to landlords. We've sort of done a blast and outreach of, social media and some of these, outreach materials, but we need to start having some, I want to say face-to-face conversations, but I mean Zoom-to-Zoom conversations to really just start talking to people about our program, answering questions, really breaking down what the program is, and then seeing if it's a fit for folks. And we're really hoping, we know a lot in the real estate world, many real estate agents have units themselves or know landlords or can think of ways to help us get connected to landlords. There's probably avenues we haven't even thought about. So we're kind of hoping that perhaps there could be a bit of support in that way. And then where can I get more information? So if you're looking for more information about the program, I'll tell you, we do have a website. That's where everything to do with Home Connect functions, and the sites there. We could probably circulate this after as well, and kind of a follow-up email. There's also the general End Homelessness St Johns website there as well. There's our email address, and I've also put my email address there too. If you want to talk to a person starting off and not just the general one, then please absolutely send me an email and we can connect if you can think of any of those initiatives in terms of partnership, networking, or raising awareness. So now we're kind of at a Q&A point. So I don't know if Ed, you might be able to support us kind of, we can't see any of the questions. But
okay, I can. We'll give, thanks very much, Doug and Simone. That was a terrific introduction, both to End Homelessness and the specific project, Home Connect. We'll give people a chance to ask any questions if they have, and what they can do is, if they look to the bottom of their screen, they'll see that there is either a chat or a Q&A function. If you scroll down to the bottom and mouse over, you'll see it there. And that's the way you can get questions through. We did have one question already, which was, is this presentation being recorded? And if so, will it be provided to attendees afterwards? And the answer is yes on both. That's a process question. We're actually also test driving this by live streaming on Facebook, but we will have this recorded, and it will be available at nlar.ca for members. We'll make that available, and we'll send the link out via email afterwards, along with some other information. So yes, no problem doing it. To get people going, though, I've got a question for you, which is, and you may have mentioned it, but if not, can you tell us, how do landlords get in touch with you? What's the contact information, or what should we do? And then if you can talk about then what kind of process you go through to vet landlords and to do those inspections that you talked about?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a couple of ways. The first one was our website. And that's why I was saying it's probably helpful for us to send it out after. But if you go straight to our Home Connect website, there's a function there where you can enter your contact information, and that sends it directly to us, and we reach out right away with kind of an initial information pack, and then have it sort of set for us to follow up with folks. The other way is to just directly send us an email to our email address, and it's myself, or we have a landlord lead called Sherwin Flight. Some of you may know him. He's quite the advocate in the community. So he'll send an email out, or we'll just set up a phone call, whatever is comfortable for the landlord. And then also you can send an email directly to me if you want just that direct line. I'm happy to sort of connect with the landlord and just have an initial, conversation. If the landlords looked through our site and said, this is the program for me, I just want to get going, I don't even want to talk to anyone. Well, what we'll do is we'll send kind of an intro packet, just the 2 to 3 pages, which is triggered by putting your contact information in our website. And then after that, we'll follow up with a phone call. If the landlord doesn't have any other questions, then we go straight to a rental inspection. So we'll go out, meet the landlord, take a look at the unit, see if there's any issues there, in terms of egress, window size, that kind of thing, just to make sure that the unit's safe, make sure that smoke detectors are working. In some case, if there isn't a battery, we'll even give you a battery. And then after that, we'll work on an MOU with the landlord, have them sign it so they understand the program. Typically, if we're kind of halfway through a month and we're ready to put that unit up on the website, we'll start setting up a holding fee right away so that a landlord can kind of have that rent for the rest of the month. So, we don't want them to lose out on what a market opportunity would be. So we'll go down that pathway, and then we'll list it on our website for community agencies to then look at for a fit for their unit. And if then a tenant does see one of those units and says, this is the right place for me, there'll be a setup for that tenant to come meet the landlord, see the unit, and then put an application in on that unit.
Okay.
So it's Bill Sterling here in the background. Just for folks who are online, if you do have a question and you don't want to type it in, you can always just raise your hand, and I can make you live. You can ask it to our guests right away. We just do have a couple of questions in the queue there now. Can you see those, Ed?
Yeah, I can see them. I think we just answered one. Carol asks, she'd like to approach my landlords on this. Is there an info package? And I think we just covered how to get in touch and the info package that'll come back. Carol, if you've got any follow-up, you can email Simone directly, or if you want to get in touch with me, I'm ehollit@nlar.ca. Kimberly has got a question. Have you guys seen an increase in the numbers of homelessness, or in the numbers of homeless since the pandemic? And if so, what percentage? And that's another kind of question. Doug alluded to this earlier, that, and I think you mentioned it as well, Simone, that during the pandemic, your workload has gone up, not down. Could you give us a better picture of that and sort of what types of things you're seeing in the community that we may not know about?
Yeah, sure. That's always a good question, because the state of homelessness in our community isn't always as visible as it could be in other communities. We don't have a large population who are rough sleeping, sleeping on the streets or encampments, which is starting to really take off in other parts of the country. The numbers have held pretty steady, but that's not to say that people aren't experiencing challenges in homelessness. It just means that they're not necessarily presenting to the emergency shelters in the same way that they may have. So that means people are staying with family or friends or couch surfing. And so we've heard a lot of that through the pandemic, especially as it relates to accessing benefits and income support benefits. Issues related to the CERB at points have all contributed to a lot of folks who are on income supports, or who are low wage earners, feeling income insecurity and food insecurity and housing insecurity. So the numbers typically we've heard from our colleagues with NL Housing is about 90 unique folks a month experiencing homelessness. So, we see opportunities to work with our housing corporation and the community partners to really you know, find unique, you know, home options for those individuals.
Well, that's okay. Thanks very much. I'm just checking to see if we've got another question there.
We got a question from Denise Butler who's on the Burke Peninsula, asking, well, I guess I'll read the question. It's a fabulous initiative that is certainly needed. Wondering if you plan to expand beyond the St. Johns area. I'm a member of the Burke Peninsula Community Advisory Board for Housing and Homelessness, and this is a great tool to take advantage of it if possible. So.
Yeah, great question. I mean, so I one of the things that when we're designing the program, in particular the website, this is a tool that can be replicated and used in any other community. It just needs to be populated with specific, you know, context-specific information in whatever community that would want it. The whole intention for us is to first start with St. Johns. I mean, it's kind of it's in our name, you know, End Homelessness St Johns, and it's, you know, our boundaries, so to speak, our jurisdiction. But, you know, we are provincially incorporated. And so we do have the opportunity to work with other community groups across the province and across the country around this. And there has been quite a bit of interest in other parts of the country about the platform. So certainly if there's organizations who are interested, we could talk about how that might function. We wouldn't perhaps be able to resource it necessarily outside of our jurisdiction, but we could find ways to do that through the province and through other funders. So certainly open to that if there is an interest.
Perfect. Okay, I see Carol Burke has her hand up. Carol, do you have another question? If so, I can make your mic live. You just need to unmute yourself. Maybe not. Well, we're possibly waiting for Carol. It's interesting. It struck me during your presentation. Oh, there's Carol. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, sorry about that. I might have missed what was just said. I just had to step away. Sorry.
Okay. You had your hand up. I just wondered if you had a question.
Oh yeah, no, that was before he answered the question that I wrote in. But just as a follow-up, to be clear, when I approached my landlord and they do have an interest, will I just pass that over to you and sort of, for want of a better saying, you would do the selling to them of how this works?
That's exactly it. We're just looking for those first connections to be able to just have a conversation with the landlord, and we'll take care of that, explain the program, talk to them about, you know, their unit, see if it's also fit for that landlord, because it may or may not be. We want to make sure it makes sense for them as much as it makes sense for us. So we'll have that conversation. I'm happy to have that conversation with any landlords. If you want to give them my direct email, I'm happy to do so. And then if it does seem like a fit, then we can take it further steps as well and just start kind of going through the process and getting into sort of the, you know, the fine details.
So you already have some landlords engaged right now?
Yeah, we have 22.
And
So
that,
22 and a few more. Yeah, a few
Landlords
more coming on.
Landlords and property management companies around town.
okay, and it's working well?
Yeah, it is. So we have some that's brought in several units. I'm sure you can all appreciate that it's kind of in Newfoundland. It's, if you see one landlord and they're having a good experience, then they'll sort of tell their friends about it. So that's sort of what we're starting to see now, is we are starting to get some referrals from the landlords themselves, which is really great. That's how you sort of grow the program. But yeah, it seems to, you know, we're still so brand new. So any kinks that we're encountering, we're working out, and kind of those grounding principles I talked about earlier about just staying in contact and communication and working through problems together. So it's been really great.
Okay, I'll certainly try to engage some involvement on my end here. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate that.
Thank
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, let me toss one out just to make sure it's all clear. End Homelessness St. Johns, are you talking about the municipality of St. Johns specifically, or are you talking about the metro region? What is your geographical catchment area?
Yeah, I mean, so we were with the city of St. John's for a number of years. We left as part of an overall governance transition. So when we were under the city, we could only support things within the boundaries. But now we take a broader approach. Metro is our jurisdiction, I would say.
Okay, terrific, thanks.
I'll call our funders though. The federal government might not be too happy, but look, there's needs outside of St. John's that can be met. So we'll do what we can.
It was interesting watching your presentation, how similar your role is to what we do as a real estate board, you know, in terms of providing an inventory of listings, some standardized processes and documentation, and even a little bit of public protection and insurance on the back end of it all. You know, I don't know if there's anything that we as an organization can do to support and lend some of that capacity as well to what you're doing, but I'd certainly be interested in having that conversation, you know.
Absolutely, Bill. I think it's interesting that you picked up on that. It's not something I've thought as much about, but you're completely right. And I think that is part of that partnership that we were talking about, where we are so similar. We are brand new, that there's things that can kind of come up that we could perhaps sort of work together on, and just from that mentorship function of, you know, that type of site. I think that would be really great. We're really open, like, as I said, any opportunities that we haven't even thought about. That's what here is, what are those pieces we can collaborate on.
Yeah, like, you know, you look like the MLS service for, you know, for that segment of the rental market, right? So that's really cool. Yeah.
I mean, for us, I mean, we recognize early on, like, if we're gonna find solutions, we can't just, you know, advocate for more affordable housing or below market rental housing to be built. We gotta tap into the existing infrastructure that exists. And this is like a community issue. It's not just a community agency issue. We're all members of the same community. So we all have a role to play. And if we want to really end homelessness, we don't have a choice but to really work across the entire spectrum of the community. So you know, we want to be solutions focused and oriented as much as we can. And that's where Home Connect really came in. It automated a lot of systems and processes that you wouldn't necessarily see from a community agency alone. But now they can tap into it in the same way that landlords and property managers can as well.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, it's interesting. We had through the National Association and Kimberly's role, we had a webinar on Tuesday, and Jesse Thistle was one of the keynote speakers. And I know you've seen Jesse speak.
He's a
and one of the points that he made, and it's something that I don't think people who are not close to the homelessness issues would understand, is that there are plenty of people that are homeless that can afford an apartment, but they can't find a landlord that's willing to take them. And, you know, he made that point quite clear, particularly, you know, from the, you know, indigenous urban homelessness perspective, but there's lots of others, right? And I think that's, you know, just, you know, these kinds of events can create that kind of awareness in, you know, members of our association and the broader community, because it's not just about people who are homeless because, you know, they can't afford somewhere to go. There's all these other social issues that go along with it, and the wraparound services that are required that you guys seem to have your head around as well, right? So it's important that we continue to have these kinds of discussions and find ways that we can support each other.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you know, early on, I think when you were introducing us, you talked a lot about the role of NLAR in terms of advocacy and raising awareness. And for me, I was really intrigued by that, because this is a way to reduce stigma. This is a way to that we all think of. So we operate through a housing first philosophy, which is essentially the idea that everybody deserves a home. And it's not just, you know, get somebody a home and then off you go. It's get somebody a home and make sure that the conditions for success are built into that. And then once you have a home and you can be safely housed, then you can think about education or training. You can think about work and employment. You can become more stable and consistent in your daily life, and you can be a contributing member to society, which is what everybody wants anyways, right? So it's, when I think of that awareness raising, it's, you know, reducing the stigma around homelessness, and really, I think, promoting the idea that housing first and getting people housed is the most central piece to ending homelessness in our community, and everybody plays a role in that.
Absolutely. I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh, Carol Burke got her hand up again, I think. Carol? Are you there, Carol?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just remembering some issues I've had that may or may not relate here. But we've often had to evict a tenant, and several times I've had a very deep concern that that person is going to be homeless. Is this something I could pass on to you?
I mean, I guess it would depend on the specific issue at hand. I would say that one of the pieces that that I know Simone had mentioned earlier is just sort of that communication between landlord and tenant and agency and us, and oftentimes can work to prevent evictions. In the event that there is an eviction that needs to be happen, then we still want to work with the landlord to make sure that the supports are in place for that individual wherever they may need to be transitioning to. And to continue to work with the landlord to ensure that somebody else can move into that unit. But it's always going to be contingent upon the specific issue at hand.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? I'm not seeing any. Bill? I don't
No,
think
just a note there from
Kimberly.
Kimberly saying, great presentation. Thank you very much. No, I'm
Absolutely.
not seeing anything else.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this session. Thanks very much, Doug and Simone, and thanks everybody who participated as an attendee here today and asked questions. We've had a tremendous amount of success. This actually came out of a quick meeting a couple of weeks ago, and one of the members of the Realtors Care Committee brought End Homelessness to our attention. So it's turned out to be a terrific opportunity, and I think we've got some great information. For all those who are still on the line, we'll be sending out more information via email, through our Facebook site, and in other ways, so that this is there. I'll carry on, and the committee will carry on working with Doug and Lily to deepen this relationship that we've started. And with that, I'll say thanks to everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks so much, Ed.
Thanks again, Ed. Thanks, Bill.
Take care.
Thanks, Michelle, Rebecca, Kimberly.